Stop the Presses, the museum in Washington, D.C., a museum that's all about the news business, announced this past week that it will be closing by the end of the year, following the path many a newspaper has already taken. Our cover story is reported by Tony Dokoupil of CBS This Morning.
There was a time when every great American city had a great American newspaper.
City room was the room where all the reporters had a desk. They'd all be in there working on big standard Royal or Remington typewriters.
Pete Hamill worked for decades in city rooms around Manhattan.
You would hear this great metallic roar. Boom! Deadline. Laughter. A few curses.
His career included stops at the old New York Herald Tribune, the New York Post, and the New York Daily News, which used to be America's largest circulation newspaper. Used to be.
The papers gave a sense of meaning. There was a binding element. You could see it on the subway. You were trying to help the new arrivals to understand the city and the older people to understand the new arrivals.
In fact, some 1,800 metropolitan and community newspapers have gone out of business or merged since 2004, pushing thousands of reporters out of a job. But the city room roars again in the HBO documentary Breslin and Hamill, Deadline Artists, about two princes of print in an era when newspapers were still king.
Back in the day, I mean, you would buy the paper, see what Jimmy Breslin's saying, you know, what Pete Hamill. I mean, these guys were like superstars.
Jimmy Breslin, who died in 2017, and Pete Hamill, now 84, grew up Irish American, more familiar with the corner bar than a college campus.
How would you define yourself as a journalist?
Reporter, not a journalist. I don't know what those words mean. That's a college word. I just go out and report, work, chase news. And in the chasing, you always run into something.
Pete Hamill had a different approach.
Hamill was, I always thought, like a poet. He'd give you the poetry of New York.
Once there was another city here, and now it is gone.
These days, it can be hard to fathom just how famous these guys could be.
Nothing gets my Irish up more than a soggy, wishy-washy cereal.
Breslin sold breakfast cereal,
Picked up today's paper and I saw what those guys did laying there.
while Hamill attracted much more than just readers.
The guy had another side, beyond the journalism. He had this almost movie star life, you know, with Miss Kennedy or Onassis, Shirley MacLaine. They were together for years.
Fame was never the goal. Can't do any writing while you're trying to be famous.
Do you remember what made you want to add your voice to the newspaper?
The sense of possibility.
Pete Hamill was born in Brooklyn.
This is an immigrant nation, and Brooklyn was a capital of immigrants. Everybody in these buildings had an old country.
His mother was a homemaker, and his father worked in factories.
Would you say you grew up poor?
Oh, we grew up poor, but not impoverished.
What's the difference?
The library.
Yes, the public library. Hamill became a library regular before he could even read.
If not for this library, where would you be today?
I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for the lessons I learned in this place. Gave me a sense that there was a world beyond the limits of where I lived here in Brooklyn.
By the time he was invited to try out for a job at the New York Post, Hamill had read enough stories to start writing them, and with style.
I had a chant that I picked up from the drummer Gene Krupa.
Lyonnaise potatoes and some pork chops. Lyonnaise potatoes and some pork chops.
Lyonnaise potatoes and some pork chops. So the first couple of weeks I was at the Post trying to write Lyonnaise potatoes, some pork chop, boom, Lyonnaise potatoes.
Jimmy Breslin's sentences, by contrast, sounded more like hammer blows.
They burned down something irreplaceable in New York this week. And there were people who looked at the ashes and turned them beautiful.
But while he cultivated a gruff reputation, Breslin was a reader, too.
One day, he needed to find something in his desk, and he asked me to go to his desk, open the drawer, and it'll be on the right-hand side. Lying in front of me is the collected poetry of W.H. Auden.
So here we have the difference between the mask and the man.
Yeah.
Over the years, both men branched into magazines and books, enough to fill a shelf at Hamill's old library.
Does it get easier from book 1 to book 20?
No.
No?
No.
Why not?
I had to make the next one something new for me.
Hamill is now working on another book and still finding time to read them, too, with his wife, the journalist Fukiko Aoki.
I understand deadline is most important for both of us. So he has a deadline, I just try to be away from him. And you need help, you need a drink, or something, let him work. This is it.
To have someone like her to hold your hand and get you through the night and the day. A bit lucky. The luckiest bastard alive.
The newspaper industry, of course, hasn't been so lucky. Today's staff at their old daily news is about 1/10 of the size it was in 1988.
Journalism, if it's any good, becomes history.
But with the recent documentary, Pete Hamill hopes to inspire others to look for national success, exactly where he and Jimmy Breslin found it, in local reporting.
What's the boiled down, shortest form advice you would have for a young journalist today?
Read. You can't write unless you read. Read the classics. If you never read Madame Bovary, it's a new book.
Do you still have a library card?
I do. Right here in my pocket in case somebody asks.
Ha!